Hello, I'm Paulo Cereda. Thanks for having me. I'm here today to tell you the story of a silly package. Gather around to learn about tech, friendship, community, silly walks, and, of course, the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. Our story begins with my friend Felipe and I talking about random things as usual. At a certain point, the conversation shifted to flipbooks. You probably know what a flipbook is. Even if the name does not ring a bell at all, you must certainly have seen one in action. A flipbook is a booklet with a series of images that very gradually change from one page to the next, so that when the pages are viewed in quick succession, the images appear to animate by simulating motion or some other change. These images are typically placed at page corners. Wait a minute, what if we implement such concept in tech? Granted, it is not a novel idea, but it's definitely a new use case of how powerful and expressive tech is, and it can bring a lot of fun too. Of course, Felipe and I were thrilled with the idea of having a tech implementation of a flipbook. It should be simple enough, as we could exploit the document page numbering to achieve the desired visual effect. But we definitely needed way more than just a good plan. We needed an actual series of images to be animated. We had a lot of ideas, but they all lacked some sort of expressiveness principle Felipe and I were looking for. If this package was supposed to reach an international audience just counting on a series of images, the visual message should be easily identified and understood, regardless of language or any other cultural aspect. We needed something completely different, and unsurprisingly, we found it in an emblematic sketch from Monty Python's Flying Circus. For those unfamiliar with the name, Monty Python's Flying Circus was a British sketch comedy series created by and starring Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, Michael Palin, and Terry Gilliam. They relied on a form of humor called surreal, which is based on deliberate violations of causal reasoning, thus producing events and behaviors that are obviously illogical. The sketch that inspired us is named The Ministry of Silly Walks, first aired on September 15, 1970. So far, we had a great, if not the greatest idea for a package. But we were still in need of proper assets. Thankfully, the Wikipedia entry for the Ministry of Silly Walks had a chart on silly walk gait with instructions done by Jason Hollins under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0 license. At least we had something to get started. Instead of having 12 independent image files, each one denoting one step in the silly walk gait chart, we decided to use a sprite sheet instead. Sprite sheet is the name of a big image containing several smaller images or icons. It is a technique employed by designers to reduce the number of requests the browser makes to the server. Reducing the number of such requests could make a web page load faster. This technique is also used in animation engines. We ended up with a silly walk stripe with 12 blocks, each block a 48 pixel square containing an image corresponding to a step in the silly walk gait chart. The implementation was straightforward. We simply had to map page numbers to their corresponding blocks in a circular fashion. Our package had to have a name, and the choice was obvious. Since the package provided John Cleese's iconic silly walk routine as a page numbering style, we named it Silly Page, of course. Version 1.0 was ready. The package documentation was perhaps far too terse, but that did not stop Felipe and I from sending it to GUTen on January 10, 2022. Version 1.0 was not fully compliant with GUTen guidelines. To name a few, we missed a top-level folder hierarchy, a proper README, and an actual example. Thankfully, Petra was amazing in helping us shape a new version. Her feedback was fantastic. Besides working on the issues reported by GUTen, we enhanced the documentation a bit, included a new macro to provide the silly walk routine step, and added an example. Felipe walked the extra mile and made the package fully compliant with the LaTeX build system for build and test purposes. Version 1.1 was ready. Felipe and I sent this new version to Stan on the same day of the previous version, January 10. This time, there were no issues reported from GUTen's side. In 1 or 2 days, barring any unforeseen events, our package would hit tech distributions. In the meantime, we started working on a new version of our package. Version 1.2 had an improved documentation to better explain the background and implementation details. On January 11, we were ready to send it to GUTen. For whatever reason, I had to postpone the update to the next day, and it proved to be a wise choice. On January 12, we got our first issue in our package repository. The culprit was a corrupted image file caused by a blip on the server side. We then took this opportunity to send version 1.2 to GUTen instead of repacking the previous one. This time, the package was successfully deployed. Little did we know our lives were about to be changed forever. As we had quite a succession of updates in the span of a few days, version 1.2 was used for the official package announcement on January 13. Of course, we had to go silly on the announcement text as well. I then announced our package via an innocent tweet and decided to tag John Cleese. Needless to say, the LaTeX corner of Twitter made it viral. People and companies joined the fun. Even the official TUG account announced our package and tagged Cleese as well. DANTE and GUTenberg also spread the news. Given the engagement and excitement around our package, I was actually hoping for any comment or reply from John Cleese himself, the Silly Walk ultimate authority, at some point, but unfortunately, that did not happen yet. Maybe he is not being annoyed sufficiently. More mentions on Twitter would definitely help. On that same day, I realized the community comments section of our package page at GUTen got a new entry. More importantly, I realized I could add a comment to our own package. Of course, I wrote a very serious text. A couple of days later, on January 16, Sam Carter wrote me about a vector-based silly walk routine she just had created. Vector graphics are not composed of pixels as raster images, so they can be scaled to any size without losing quality. It was definitely a quantum leap from our current approach. Philippe simplified the code to use a multi-page PDF file containing the silly walk steps in vector format instead of our original single raster image. Version 1.3 was then sent to GUTen on January 20. I opened an issue on that same day about a future improvement to our package. The silly walk animation was repeated over on a circular fashion, which was not ideal when unique page references had to be used, hence the need of a support for a proper silly numeral system. The next day, on January 21, Ulrich Fischer opened an issue with yet another improvement to our package, this time a code update to make it hyperref friendly. Those two newly created issues were actually a good opportunity to work on a new version as soon as possible. In the meantime, on January 22, GUTen published the package update announcement for version 1.3, which was released 2 days earlier. Of course, we had another serious text. I tweeted about it. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Apparently, the idea of having your own life-size John Cleese-like silhouette cardboard in your living room is appealing to a significant number of tech users. Back to our package, Felipe rewrote the entire code using the LaTeX 3 programming interface, and we added the silly numeral system and hyperref support. On February 2, version 1.4 was sent to GUTen, our latest and greatest version to date. Incidentally, since Sam Carter and Ulrich greatly contributed to our package since the beginning, they were invited to join the team and, of course, the blame list. The next day, on February 3, GUTen published the package update announcement for our latest version. Of course, as it's now a tradition, we had another serious text. I tweeted about it, making sure to tag John Cleese. Again, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People really enjoyed our silly package. Thanks to Felipe, our package was fully LaTeX 3 compliant, so we decided to register our prefix. This registration is of course not compulsory, but is encouraged. I promptly contacted the LaTeX project team and kindly asked them to add the silly prefix to the database under our care. Since this was an unusual and fun prefix, the LaTeX team had some fun discussing its potential use in the kernel. A couple of days later, Sam Carter wrote me telling that we've made into pop culture. The Wikipedia article about the Ministry of Silly Walks has a section named References in Popular Culture. Apparently, someone thought our silly package was worth a mention in this section. Quite the achievement. Frank Mittelbach is working on the 3rd edition of the LaTeX Companion, so I decided to write him. Unfortunately, our silly package could not make the cut due to time constraints. We should definitely aim for the 4th edition. In issue 45 of the Gutenberg journal, the editors used our silly page numbering on every Verso page. Their description of our package is fantastic. No one knows what this package is for. What a jewel this issue is. On June 24, during the summer DANTE meeting, Sam Carter presented a lightning talk about our silly package. It was a lot of fun. The attendees really liked it. Using a silly package like this is quite straightforward. For starters, make sure to include it in your document preamble through use package silly page, and that's it. Now, let us learn about the available interface and create a silly document. Write page numbering silly somewhere in your document body to use our silly page numbering style. You can also use the silly macro on a LaTeX counter to typeset the corresponding image for the value of that counter. It's worth mentioning that this particular macro is applied to counters and not to integers. The silly step macro, as the name implies, prints the provided step number from the sequence of steps. This macro works exactly like silly, but on integers instead of counters. For sillier documents, especially articles, theses, and books, you can write page numbering silly numeral somewhere in your document to use a silly numeral system, in which each page will be converted to a unique composition of silly steps. Note that this macro differs from its silly page style, as the former is a proper base 12 numeral system, whereas the latter simply walks through a 12 cycle silly routine. Finally, the silly numeral macro provides the silly numeral system representation from the provided integer value. Again, this is a proper base 12 numeral system. What a silly yet marvelous interface! Let us see our package in action and be greeted with the silly walk routine. To impress your supervisor, we highly recommend you to use our package in your thesis, print it, and ask them to view those pages in quick succession so the images appear to animate by simulating motion. It is known to work with thesis committees as well. That's the story of how a silly package brought a smile to the tech community in these difficult times, warmed their hearts, and made people have legitimate fun. We hope you enjoyed it too. That's all from me today. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Cheerio.